Hello everyone, and welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and tap like so you never miss another update, because today's story is one of those rare moments when the glossy veneer of fame slips and a very real, very human heart steps forward. We're talking about Yağmur Yüksel, poised, elegant, famously composed, who, for the first time, opened up about the breakup that has quietly reshaped her world. The name at the center of it all is Barış, and what was supposed to be a simple sit-down about her upcoming projects turned into an unexpectedly raw confession that left everyone in the room silent and the internet holding its breath. The interview began as routine, lights humming, makeup already settled, a tidy list of questions about scripts, brand collaborations, and release dates. You could see her begin in her usual rhythm, polished, careful, offering warm yet measured answers. Then, the conversation drifted toward her personal life. The host hesitated, the way hosts do when stepping onto delicate ground, and mentioned Barış. The question was gentle, but its weight was obvious. How was she moving forward after the breakup? That's when something shifted. Yağmur's voice caught, a tremor barely there at first. She swallowed, looked down at her hands, and for a moment you could almost hear the quiet of the room. She tried to smile. It didn't quite land. "I'm trying to keep going," she said, almost whispering, as if afraid the truth might echo too loudly. "But sometimes every song feels like a memory. Every street reminds me of a moment. Even a scent, it takes me back. I wish I could erase it, but I can't." There was no anger, no edge, just the kind of honesty that comes from someone who has kept it in for too long. The camera caught the gloss of tears forming, then falling, the kind of tears that surprised even her. She straightened slightly, not to perform or to recover the facade, but to say something she seemed determined to leave behind for anyone listening. "People often think strong women don't cry," she continued, her words steadying as they went. "But strength isn't about never breaking. It's about being able to carry the pain without letting it turn you bitter. I'm hurting, quietly, sometimes, but I'm still here." It was the kind of line that doesn't try to be a headline and becomes one anyway, because it is unguarded and true. Within hours, that clip had traveled everywhere. Social media flooded with messages from fans who had watched her in dramas and endorsements and on red carpets, now seeing her with mascara smudged and a courage that had nothing to do with applause. "It really does hurt, we understand you," one comment read, a sentiment echoed across timelines and stories. People who had never met her wrote about their own breakups, their own long walks home, the way a cafe or a song could open the door to a memory they wished would stay closed. In a space that often rewards spectacle, the quiet dignity of her heartbreak became its own kind of sensation. Behind the scenes, people close to Yağmur confirmed what her tears already told us. The separation had carved out a deep ache, the kind that lingers even when you have every reason to move forward. Someone who's known her for years said the gentleness we saw wasn't new, it was simply the first time she allowed it to be seen in the context of this love. And yes, even through the hurt, she loved him. That truth, too, hung in the air of that room, undeniable and unadorned. When the interviewer, careful but curious, asked whether she felt any anger toward Barış, Yağmur's answer unfolded with a grace that felt almost old-fashioned in its refusal to play to drama. "He was a very important part of my life," she said, choosing each word as if it might carry her across a narrow bridge. "I'm not going to speak badly about him. We're not together now, but I wish him peace. I wish him calm. I wish him to be okay." There was no pointed pause, no subtext of revenge, just an acceptance so rare in a spotlight culture that feeds on friction. Her sincerity touched a chord. In an industry that often rewards the loudest reaction and the messiest headline, this was something else. A kind of maturity that refuses to turn love into spectacle. She added, almost to herself, "Some loves don't end, they just change." And with that, she gave the breakup a shape that didn't make villains out of either of them. It wasn't a denial of pain, it was an acknowledgement that pain and respect can coexist. That sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let a chapter close without burning the book. Of course, the next question for everyone watching was inevitable: how would Barış respond? Would there be a post, a statement, a late-night note on his story? Sources say he didn't rush to type a single word. Instead, he watched the interview quietly, somewhere private, without commentary. Those who know him well described him as moved, not the dramatic, cinematic kind of moved, but the way a person is moved when a familiar voice on a screen sounds exactly like it does in your memories. He said nothing, and according to a mutual friend, that silence wasn't apathy, it was respect. The friend put it simply, he still cares, but he knows talking now could open wounds they're both trying to heal. He thinks staying quiet is a way of loving carefully, from a distance. It's the kind of reasoning that doesn't trend easily, but it felt consistent with what we saw from both sides, restraint. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because they both understood the cost of saying it. Meanwhile, Yağmur did what so many people with public lives do when their private ones are in pieces. She went back to work. Sets at dawn, fittings at noon, rehearsals in the evening, long nights memorizing lines and listening to the soft buzz of a city that doesn't stop just because your world has. She smiled for cameras when she had to, ducked away when she could, and tried to let routine become a kind of shield. But tenderness has a way of finding the cracks in a schedule. Sometimes on set a song starts playing and it's like the whole day folds in on itself, she admitted. It would be something ordinary, a melody from a cafe that used to be theirs, a chorus they sang along to in traffic, and suddenly she would be fighting to stay present while her heart wandered down a street she hadn't walked in months. The call sheet might say scene 14, take 3, but in her head it was Sunday morning in a kitchen that smelled like coffee, with a laugh she still knew by sound alone. Friends say there were other moments like that. A diner they once slipped into after midnight, the corner table where they traded stories and secrets, the scent of rain on warm pavement, the way it always seems to pull the Bosphorus closer, a jacket he left in the back of her car, a line from a film they watched and teased each other about for a week. None of it dramatic enough to headline a scandal. All of it powerful enough to bring a person to the brink of tears between setups. Still, through it all, there was no lashing out, no accidental shade disguised as wisdom, no blame. If anything, the most striking part of her confession was how carefully she protected him even as she laid bare her own hurt. It's not that she minimized what they had, she honored it by refusing to turn it into fuel. And that choice resonated, with fans, with colleagues, even with people who don't follow celebrity stories but recognize the shape of a love that mattered and the grace it takes to let it evolve into memory without vilifying its ending. For those who know Barış, his quiet made sense. He's built a career on presence, the steady kind that doesn't need noise to be felt. The decision not to respond publicly didn't come from a void, but from a calculation that words, once released, can't be recalled. He watched, he listened, and he carried the weight of what wasn't said. There were no late-night calls, no sudden grand gestures, no cryptic captions. Just the hum of real life, the shuffle of days finding their shape without the person who used to fill them. In the days after, the interview took on a life of its own. Clips and quotes spun out across timelines, cut with soft music and captions, each viewer lingering on a different detail, the quiver in her voice, the way she wiped her tears with the back of her hand and laughed at herself for it, the moment she let silence fill the space rather than rushing to smooth it over. Fans and strangers alike offered their own stories as replies, a chorus of empathy that reminded everyone watching that no amount of fame insulates a person from the ache of goodbye. This is the part of the story where we're supposed to tell you that time heals everything, that work will save her, that soon there will be a new someone, a new chapter, a new set of photographs to argue about in comment sections. Maybe that will be true one day. But for now, it seems the honest version is simpler. She is healing, unevenly, in the way most of us do. She shows up. She breathes through it. She laughs with friends. She avoids certain songs and then finds herself humming them anyway. She sleeps, she wakes, she goes to set, she walks past places she used to pause in, and the city meets her with 1,000 tiny reminders that love doesn't just end, it lingers. And perhaps that's the real reason this interview struck such a chord. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a mirror. Yağmur didn't demand sympathy, and she didn't deny the hurt. She invited us into a small corner of truth, that you can be admired by many and still be tender in private, that you can let go without making a scene, that it is possible to both wish someone well and miss them with an ache that feels older than you are. She showed that being strong sometimes looks exactly like letting a tear fall in good light and choosing not to look away from it. As for what comes next, the answer might be less glamorous than a headline would prefer. She'll keep working. He will, too. They'll pass each other's names in the news, in conversations, maybe in rooms where they used to sit together. Maybe, one day, there will be a nod across a crowded event, a soft smile that acknowledges what once was and allows what is. Maybe the timeline will do what timelines do, move forward. And maybe that single sentence she offered will be the bridge that carried them there. Some loves don't end, they change shape and keep living quietly in the places that formed them. So if you're watching this and you've ever stood in a doorway with your keys in your hand, unsure of whether to go back or go on, if you've ever heard a melody in a supermarket and had to leave your cart and step outside for air, if you've ever wished someone peace even as you missed them, you understood her without needing to know every detail. Because that is the part of this story that belongs to everyone, famous or not. The glitter fades, the camera cuts, and what remains are the simple, stubborn pieces, the street you avoid, the cafe you still love, the promise you keep to yourself to be kind, to be steady, to be patient with the time it takes to feel okay again. We began by saying this was a rare moment when the mask slipped. But maybe that isn't quite right. Maybe it wasn't a mask at all. Maybe it was another version of strength, one that looks like honesty rather than polish. And in that sense, what Yağmur shared about Barış wasn't a scandal or a stunt. It was a gift to anyone living through the same soft disaster. She didn't rewrite the past or dramatize the ending. She simply held it up to the light and said, "I'm still learning how to carry this. I won't break anyone to feel lighter. I'll let time do what time does." And that's where we'll leave it, for now. Two people who mattered to each other, learning how to be kind from across a distance. A woman who chose to speak without wounding. A man who chose to listen without answering. A love that didn't vanish so much as it took on a gentler form, the kind that lingers as a lesson in the background of busy days. Work will go on, premieres will arrive, the city will keep singing its unending songs. And in the midst of all that, a truth will remain as steady as any headline: the heart breaks, and somehow, with grace, it keeps beating.